Now, space has long provided the technology for space-based intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, or ISR, also GPS, or global navigation, satellite systems and satellite communications, as well as heat-based missile warning. But should we be seeing space as no longer just supporting warfare, but also shaping who can see, strike and survive? In the Iran war, space proved to be a first mover. A few days in, US Military Central Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said this.
We've also struck Iran's equivalent of Space Command, which degrades their ability to threaten Americans.
So Mark, you've also commanded the Battle Force 7th Fleet. How would you compare space as a domain alongside, the others, air, sea, land?
Well, space is an independent domain, and in fact, in the United States, about 6 years ago, we made a decision to create a space force to actually focus our people, technology, and processes efforts in space. That's slowly bearing fruit, and what it does is it allows us to use space as more than just an enabler. Space helps; it does enable land, maritime, and air power. But you can also conduct operations in space. You can conduct denial operations, surveillance operations. There will be a day when we conduct offensive operations from space. I think we're getting very close to that sort of declaration in the United States, because we see both Russia and China in an undeclared fashion putting up aggressive weaponized satellites. So yes,
what do you mean by offensive operations?
Well, eventually we're going to have effectors or missiles or things that look like missiles in space that leave space, enter the atmosphere and strike like hypersonic missiles or ballistic missiles in flight. In theory, they could strike ground targets. So, I would suggest that at a minimum, you're going to see defensive weapons placed in space that in a defensive manner operate from space, to shoot down ballistic missiles or hypersonic missiles.
Right. And this concept, this idea of a glass battlefield, what does that tell us about how space is changing things?
The glass battlefield implies that, you kind of have a persistent stare. And we certainly, over the last 45 days in Iran, have had a persistent stare where our overhead imagery can see everything. It allows for really effective deliberate planning, where you plan ahead of time to target your strikes, but also your dynamic targeting, where someone moves on the battlefield, exposes themselves, and you can very rapidly turn a satellite image into a targeting targeting playbook, into a strike. So it is a glass battlefield in that sense, and when you have a dominant position like the United States does with Iran, it can be very effective.
So let's go to perhaps an example of that, of how space technologies have been used in Iran.
Think of it, they shot 100 missiles at one of our aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln, one of the biggest ships in the world, actually. And out of 101 missiles shot, every single one of them was knocked down in the sea. Think of that. Think of what that means. 101 missiles, highly sophisticated, very fast missiles shot. Out of 101, all 101 were shot down, and now, for the most part, lie at the bottom of the sea.
Mark, so to what extent did the space-based infrared system help to detect those missiles?
I'm sure it played a significant role. And I'll say the president's flourishing rhetoric, I'm sure 100 or so missiles were shot at the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group, a group of ships. Some number were missiles, some number were drones, some went fast, some went slow, some were shot down, some just crashed on their own. But his rhetoric belies a truth. And the truth is, when you can see things from a distance, see the plumes of a missile launch so that you know that a threat's coming out, it extends your battle space, your ability to defend yourself. It gives you defense in depth because you know something's coming for 6 minutes instead of 4 minutes, or 12 minutes instead of 4 minutes. And when you have that, that means multiple weapon systems can engage, and you have a very successful week like the Abraham Lincoln had, shooting down every missile or drone that came at it. So the ESPRs and the other space-based sensor systems, and there are more than just that one, have been critical in our success.
So ESPRs itself works on detecting the heat signature, is that, and within just seconds?
That's right. The NI in ESPRs is the words infrared, and it's part of a broader effort that we've been working on recently called Golden Dome, and that Golden Dome is a an overall effort to protect the U.S. homeland, but also our forces in the field, which would include forces in and around Taiwan, Japan, Korea, from hypersonic cruise or ballistic missiles. To do that, you really need to be sensing in space. So we will launch as part of Golden Dome thousands of space-based sensors, but we'll also launch thousands of satellites with effectors or missiles on them. And between the two, you'll sense, make a command decision, and launch to defend from space. And I would bet 70% of the money we spend on Golden Dome over the next decade will actually be spent in space.
Right. Wow, that's a big proportion. Jason, let me bring you in quickly. In terms of Taiwan, tell us how Taiwanese companies are carving some space in this supply chain.
Yes, we all know Taiwan is the number one chip makers in the world, and we also make lots of important electronic parts, components that is used in all the aerospace and weapon systems. They are important, critical supply chains in making all those advanced weaponries. And because of that, Taiwan plays a very important role in the overall global situation. And so we just play our role very well. And then we still need to depend our own capability to defend our country. We also planning for any space, any developments in Taiwan also for sending, launching satellites for our own use. So that's a very good planning to play a critical role in the overall global conditions.
Okay. Mark, you wanted to jump in there?
Well, I would say one of the things that I've been concerned about was the preponderance of phishing and spoofing, jamming and spoofing in space. Our older GPS systems are at great risk. They were launched 30 and 40 years ago. We and our allies, including Taiwan, rely on them heavily. The good news is we thought about this 20 years ago and said, we'll launch a system in the next 5 years. The bad news is it took us 20 years to launch a 5-year system. But now all those are up, and a new technology called L5, a new antenna spectrum is up there, and it's going to make it's much harder to jam, 30 times harder to jam. And the reason we're able to do that is because we put up a new satellite list. But it's up to countries like Taiwan, like Japan, like the United States to then buy the proper sensors to receive the L5 transmission.